Step 4. Savings and spending. Let's look at savings next. Sam asked Dave why saving wasn't part of investments. "Well," said Dave, "it could be, and used to be, but interest rates are so low these days that I prefer to keep it in this bucket. Unless you have a specific savings goal, like a deposit on a house, it is better to have a safety net or emergency fund, and then get the rest of your money working for you for as long as possible." Sam wasn't even considering buying a house at this stage, so Dave continued to explain that savings are a bit different to the rest. It is not a fixed percentage. Depending on circumstances, you may want to save more or less. A good rule of thumb is to build up at least 6 months of fixed expenses, which are readily available. Perhaps put 5% aside for now to build this up. Then you can reduce or increase that later. Sam didn't yet know how much his fixed expenses came to, so that seemed like a good next step. So Sam and Dave had a quick look through Sam's bank statements and were able to identify his main fixed expenses, including rent and transport. For Sam, they came to 55% of his income, a little high, but okay. Dave then said add a 5 to 10% buffer as you get things that don't come up every month, like birthdays, Christmas, and fixing your bike. These irregular and at times unforeseeable expenses are often difficult to predict, but if your buffer gets above a certain amount, you can transfer it to your emergency fund, or can be transferred to your lifestyle fund or investments. Sam had already cut back on some of his expenses after their first conversation, but felt he could do more. He decided to park it for now as he needed time to develop his more conscious spending habits. Dave gave Sam a list of places he could look to reduce expenses later. Sam made a commitment to every 3 months find at least one expense to reduce. He set himself a calendar reminder. They had a quick look at some of Sam's recurring flexible expenses. Based on taking his opening bank balance and closing bank balance minus his fixed expenses, they were able to get a rough idea. Sam worked out he was spending about 35% of income on flexible spending. It was high, but he felt he could cut back without really impacting the things he really enjoyed, as long as he automated all his expenses and investments to happen straight after payday. Then he knew how much he had left to spend, guilt-free. Dave then showed something in the workbook that he thought would be useful. It was a calculation which showed him how many hours and days he was working for any regular expense, such as his old latte habit. Sam would play about with that later.